Greetings, Internet people. Ranting Ramsey here, and welcome to another edition of the Rant Request. Today's Rant Request comes to me from a YouTube user by the screen name of ProxyXIII, or if you're fluent in Roman numerals, that's Proxy13. And he asked me, obviously by the title of the rant, what my opinion is on the hot button issue of Are Video Games Art? And I decided to take a slightly different approach to this because there are actually some videos out there on YouTube about this exact same subject, some of them done by YouTube users who are much more well known than I. But I didn't think that my lower status meant that I couldn't attack this issue myself. Any of you who have been watching me for a while know that I am a pretty avid gamer, and so you can probably imagine what my opinion is going to be on this one. But the approach I decided to take was I decided to start with looking at a few definitions of art, because it's a word that can sort of fluctuate in its definition depending on the person defining it. And so I went to dictionary.com for ease of reference, basically, and it had about 15 different definitions of art, and I found three that seemed the most appropriate for the issue that we're talking about. And the first definition, the actual first one on the list, is the quality, production, expression, or realm according to aesthetic principles of what is beautiful, appealing, or more than ordinary significance. And I thought about this for a minute, and the first thing I thought of was the term expression in this definition. And video games are most definitely expressive. From massive blockbuster games to minor independently produced games, all of them involve a visual representation of a world, real or imagined. These can be based in reality, an example adhering to the known laws of physics and or current technology, or based in fantasy, an example involving fantastical, fictitious places and scenarios and or characters. Either way, it involves some level of creativity for the developers of the games, in all or most stages, to use their imagination to create something new or alter something existing. Is this not what most commonly accepted forms of art also do? Does a painting not reflect the imagination or impression of its painter? If you find the answer to this question is yes, then why does a video game not reflect the same upon its creators? I kind of smell a double standard on the wind when it comes to that one. Moving on slightly a bit, the fifth definition that dictionary.com offers for art is any field using the skills or techniques of art. Once again, we must remind ourselves that video games are a visual media, and someone, somewhere, had to create the visual images that comprise the game. Not only is it a visual media, but a visual media that takes a certain level of skill to do well. Any gamer out there has doubtlessly played a game that had bad graphic representation that detracted from the game. Is this not the same as a sloppy painting or a poorly written poem that fails to invoke the emotions that it's trying to invoke? I submit that it is pretty much the same thing, that the visual representation is indeed effective of the overall art. And once again, moving on to the 12th listed, having trouble speaking today, definition, which was skilled workmanship, execution, or agency as distinguished from nature. My question to you then is, how can anyone deny that video games are exactly this definition of art? As mentioned, it takes skill to perform the media well, and it even takes skill to perform it poorly. And we can certainly agree that games are certainly distinguished from nature. Can anyone provide me an invalidating argument for this point? I really don't think anyone can, but then again, maybe someone can. So if you can, please present it to me in a video response or something like that. I'd be interested to engage in a debate with you on this particular subject. But basically what we are left with is a very hollow argument against games being art. How is it that a novelist can be considered as participating in an accepted art form by creating an imaginary world, setting, or characters, and a video game developer cannot be, when they are both doing the exact same thing, simply in different forms of media? What that means is someone who writes a book that is based in fiction is doing nothing different than someone who creates a video game that is based entirely in a fictitious world. One is using words to create the world, the settings, the characters, and describe for you a situation, scenario, or feeling. And video games are using code to create a visual representation of exactly the same criteria. So how is it that one can be a valid art form and the other is in debate? I really don't see this as being a mystery. Video games, certainly, by these criteria, are art. And is it because video games are mass-produced and marketed? I honestly don't see that as a valid counter-argument, as plays and movies are definitely considered art and do exactly the same thing. Someone creates a movie and is considered, by definition, an artist. But the whole point of creating that movie was to tell a story and then sell it to the masses to make money to make another movie. Is that not exactly what a video game is? It is someone who has created a fictitious realm and then market it to the masses specifically to make money to make another game. Movies and video games are exactly the same in that regard. The only difference is interactivity. For that matter, how many of you gamers out there have played a game that sucked you into its world more capably than a movie or a book has? Final Fantasy, Uncharted, Halo, Gears of War, God of War are the first examples that come to mind of games with cinematic qualities in their presentation and story. How is a bad movie, like, for example, Transformers 2, considered art and the aforementioned games are not? It just seems to me to be just a complete and total double standard. And I don't know if the proponents of movies and paintings and plays and poems are just butthurt that video games could just kind of really, if you look at it in the scale of time, come out of fucking nowhere. And because really, if you talk about the scale of human history, video games have been along for like this fucking long, whereas visual art has been around for like this long on the freaking timeline. And yet, video games seem to be increasing in popularity and in general usage much, much faster than things like painting and whatnot did. So is this just a certain level of butthurt by the people who are not involved in video games, that they just want to invalidate an art form that they themselves do not participate in and therefore cannot cash in on monetarily? I mean, that really honestly seems to be one of the major points here, that in some of the research that I've done that keeps coming up, is that video games are marketed, they're just done to make money. But what about trash novelists like Stephen King, who just keep popping out movie or books after books after books after books simply because he needs to make more money? And I think anyone who reads all of his books will agree that some of them are a complete and total miss, where some of them are actually good. Why would he continue to do this if not to keep cashing in? So it just seems like the whole monetary argument is invalidated there. I don't know, it just kind of frustrates me that someone could be a proponent of one art form and then look at something else that's not an art form that they may particularly agree with and go, that's not art. Well, you know what? We've all seen these grotesque modern art that's nothing more than like twisted pieces of metal painted one uniform color or something like that, and people go, yes, that's art. No, it's not. I mean, if that's fucking art, what am I doing sitting here making videos when I could literally just be welding together pieces of metal and selling it to idiots for millions of dollars? It just, come on, people, let's have some level playing field here. If you're going to say one thing is an art form for certain criteria, and then look at something else that has those same criteria and go, that's not an art form, you're not a critic, you're a hypocrite. That's pretty much what I have to say at this point. I'm Ramsey. That's my rant. I want to know what you think. Peace.
Hey, did you get all that, man?